Hello, Paula and Tina. We've got Janet, Daniel, welcome. They're all starting to come in now. We'll just give it a few minutes. For those of us that have been online previously, we just like to get up to about 20 participants. We do have a lot of registrations. So what we will do is just wait until we get to a certain number, which is around that 20 mark. And we will kick off. So thank you everyone for joining us. They're starting to come in more and more. It's wonderful to see familiar names popping back up. Some of you have been with us for all 4 sessions, which we're so super pumped to have you involved in this, and I hope that you're finding just as much value from the sessions as what we have as staff in being able to provide it for you as well. A few more seconds. I do hope that we get a higher number coming through. Just a reminder to those that are online with us, if you have any colleagues or collaborative relationships, networks that you have out there where you've been speaking about the sessions that we're running, please encourage them to jump onto our YouTube channel and have a look. After today's session, Tara will have that to me, as she does, in a very timely manner, and we'll be able to pop that one up for you as well. So we've got about 14 people there, Tara. I'm not sure, we're a few minutes into it, if we would like to kick off now or just give it a few more minutes. Okay, let's kick it off. So firstly, I would like to acknowledge the rich cultural and spiritual connections of the Aboriginal people here on Wanneroo land where I sit today, and respectfully remember the footsteps of the ancestors who have walked this land before you and I, and for all of those who followed. Again, we see repeat attendees, which is wonderful. We'll just go through that little bit of housekeeping. We encourage you to keep your mics on mute, but use the chat function and the Q&A function if you have any questions or queries that you would like to ask of the presenters. This is session 4, and we are really excited to be learning more about prevention and strong and deadly futures, as well as Inroads. So I'm now going to turn my microphone off and hand it over to Tara. Thanks, Tara.
Wonderful, and thank you, Gail, and yeah, thank you again everyone for joining us for the last session, so session 4 of this series that the Matilda Centre has been delivering. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of Australia before we begin today, and I recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture. I am currently on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. And I further acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which you are on, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I'd like to acknowledge and welcome any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today as well. I'll just go through a quick few housekeeping points. So Gail's already covered a few of those, but as participants, you are currently on listen-only mode. So that means we're not able to hear or see you. And we are recording this session, and it will be made available to you along with the slides. So the video is going to be up on the New South Wales CDAT YouTube channel. And we're also going to have time for a question and answer session at the end. So please feel free to add any questions you have throughout the session in either the Q&A box or the chat there. And as we've mentioned, this is part 4 of a series that we've been delivering. So today's session is going to be looking at prevention programs for specific population groups. And if you do want to go back and listen to any of the other sessions where we covered a lot more on primary prevention and some other prevention programs, you can access those on the New South Wales CDAT channel. We're now an outline for today's session, which we're looking at 3 different programs. So those are Prevention, Strong and Deadly Futures and Inroads. And the presenters are going to be covering things about what the program is, who it's suitable for, what sort of content the program covers, and the outcome of the program or how it's being evaluated. So to kick us off today is going to be Lucy Grummer, who's going to be presenting on prevention. Over to you, Lucy.
Thanks so much, Tara, and thanks everyone for joining today. It's awesome to be here. I'm just going to juggle the old screen share kind of themes. Okay, hopefully you can all see that. Someone yell out
Perfect,
if I'm
Lucy.
okay.
Yep.
Beautiful. Thank you, Tara. Okay, so as Tara mentioned, I'm going to be talking today about Preventure. I've been working on the program since 2017 as a project coordinator and also doing some research on the evidence from our clinical trials on Preventure. So I'm going to start by talking about what Preventure is. I'll go through the evidence base of Preventure and how that's been evaluated. And then I'll talk more about how the CDATs and you guys can get involved if Preventure sounds like something that would be a good fit for you. So Preventure was developed by Professor Conrad at the University of Montreal, and since then it's been adapted for use in multiple different countries, including Australia. But basically, Preventure is a selective prevention program. So this means that rather than being delivered to a whole year group or the population more broadly, it's selectively delivered to adolescents who we think are at greater risk of experiencing substance misuse or other mental health issues. And we sort of base their risk on certain personality traits. And I'll go through in more detail what those personality traits are. And Preventure is delivered ideally to that sort of 13 to 14-year-old age group. And this really lets us intervene prior to the onset of substance use and other mental disorders. And I'm sure if you've been attending all these webinars, someone else has spoken about the importance of adolescence for prevention. So I won't go into that in too much detail. So Preventure really aims to help young people understand how their personality can sort of lead them to emotions and behaviors that might not be very helpful for them. And really through the program, young people learn how to identify maybe more helpful ways of coping with those thoughts and emotions that keep them on track for their sort of more longer term goals and allow them to really deal with those thoughts and emotions they might be having. And so the sort of overall aim is to help them identify coping skills other than using substances to cope with these emotions, and also improve their mental well-being. So they seem like quite lofty aims, but I'll go through the evidence base of the program. So as I mentioned, Preventure targets personality risk factors. So really these 4 personality traits. So negative thinking is really that kind of depressive or hopeless personality trait that involves things like low mood and really negative beliefs about themselves or the people around them and the future. We also target anxiety sensitivity, which is related to anxiety, but is much more about this fear of the physical sensations that accompany being anxious. So getting really afraid or worked up when you feel your heart beating faster because you're nervous about something, or you feel sort of nauseous. It's sort of a fear of those sensations. Also impulsivity. So that's the really kids that have difficulty inhibiting their responses, who struggle to sort of think things through before they act. And finally, sensation seeking, which is really to do with sort of being intolerant to boredom, really need to be stimulated all the time and chase the fun. And this can lead to a lot of risk-taking behavior. So they're kind of the 4 personality profiles that we target in the program. So a lot of research has gone into looking at how these personality types relate to substance use, and this evidence is why Preventure really focuses on these traits. And we see basically with the negative thinking group, they show an earlier onset of substance use, so quite young when they start to use substances, and then quite heavy consumption, with really motivated to drink to cope with some of the negative emotions that they're experiencing. With anxiety sensitivity, this personality trait typically leads to a later onset. So they're not starting that early, but once they do start to use substances, they respond really positively to the anxiety reducing effects of alcohol. So they find it really rewarding, and this sort of leads to quite increased consumption quite quickly after they start consuming substances. The impulsivity group also show, similar to negative thinking, show an earlier onset of substances, and they show quite problematic drinking, so high levels of drinking and binge drinking. And they're more motivated by their lack of ability, or their struggle to inhibit their responses. So they not really think things through and just consume substances without a certain motivation as the others have. And then the sensation-seeking personality trait leads also to an earlier onset of substance use. Similarly, quite a lot of binge drinking in this group and other alcohol-related harms. So, getting involved in accidents because of their drinking, or other problems. And this is sort of related to their motivation to drink for enhancement of that fun. So they're always chasing the fun or trying to find something new and engaging. They often get involved in a lot of dares because they just love being the center of attention and, just want to have a good time, basically. We also see that these personality types are associated with other sort of mental health or behavioral problems. So perhaps unsurprisingly, negative thinking is sort of a vulnerability for emotional problems such as depression. For anxiety sensitivity, we see a lot of panic-related disorders and other emotional problems. And then the impulsive and sensation-seeking young people often will struggle with antisocial behaviours or risk-taking behaviours, as I mentioned. So understanding all that, when we actually move into the nitty-gritty of what Preventure involves, firstly, you would have your whatever group of young people you were planning to run the program with, and you would ask them to complete the substance use risk profile scale. So this is a 23-item self-report questionnaire. So the young person will go through and respond as to what they think they usually do in certain situations. And so in that sense, it's measuring personality. It doesn't actually ask about substance use at all. And that's because at this age group, we're really trying to identify those students at risk for substance use before they've started using. So by measuring their personality, we can get at that risk. We don't have to wait for them to have started using substance use. And then, yes, so the SERPs is a valid and reliable instrument. It's been validated across the world, but also in Australia. The second part of Preventure involves scoring the personality questionnaire. It identifies which students are scoring highly on those personality traits, and the groups are mutually exclusive. So you'll get students scoring highly on negative thinking or sensation seeking. As an example, you wouldn't put them into both groups. And so those students that are scoring highly on one of the personality traits will take part in the Preventure intervention. The intervention itself is quite brief, so it's just 2 sessions of 90 minutes each in small groups, and usually run about a week apart, and that's to give the students time to sort of apply the skills they learned in session 1 to their life, or start noticing how, oh yeah, that thing I learned in Preventure about my personality is sort of actually applicable in my life. And the sessions are really focused on personality and not substance use. So really looking at how certain parts of their personality may have made them act a certain way or made them think a certain thing, and looking at better ways that they could maybe cope with that emotional behavior. The program is delivered by trained facilitators and co-facilitators, and I'll talk you through the aspects of training a bit later. The intervention themselves is based on motivational interviewing, so goal setting, pros and cons of certain behaviours, as well as cognitive behavioural therapy. So really trying to help young people understand how their thoughts and physical sensations can lead to certain actions, and really identifying and challenging certain cognitive distortions that might be relevant to their personality style. So the evidence for Preventure, it has been evaluated so far in around 8, I think, clinical trials. We might have another one in there since this was published in 2016. And sort of overall, the average effect size over all these randomized control trials showed that Preventure reduced alcohol use, binge drinking and drinking related harms by around 30 to 50%. So that's really encouraging, and it's good to get those results over multiple trials, including the Australian trial, which I'll talk about in more detail. So Preventure was adapted for use in Australia first with Australian students, and then we conducted a randomized control trial with 7 schools allocated to the control group and 7 schools allocated to the Preventure group. And you can see there about sort of between 10 and 12% of the year group was screening highly on one of these personality traits. So altogether about 40% of the grade showed high risk personality traits. That was similar for the intervention and control groups. Then the control group received health education as usual, so that's just their regular PE lessons, and the Preventure group received the Preventure interventions, so specific to their personality. And then the students were followed up over 3 years. So after the intervention, kept completing surveys measuring their mental health and substance use over 3 years. And at the end of the 3 years, we found the students who were in the Preventure schools reported less alcohol use, such as uptake of alcohol, so initiation of alcohol use, lower binge drinking, and less alcohol-related harms compared to the students in the control schools. We also looked at the mental health outcomes and found similar benefits for psychological distress, anxiety symptoms, depressive symptoms, as well as conduct problems and hyperactivity. More recently, since then, we looked at outcomes for bullying to see whether Prevention might have an impact on mental health following exposure to bullying. We did find that the victims in the Preventure schools showed reduced bullying victimization, so there was less bullying overall, and then lower suicidal ideation, emotional problems, and conduct problems. And then for the bullies in the Prevention schools, we also found lower suicidal ideation and conduct problems. So this is sort of a area for our next steps, looking at how prevention might help to mitigate some of the impacts of bullying. And I've just put the paper there if anyone wants to find out more. We also wanted to see what the students thought about Preventure. So we asked them what they liked about the sessions. You can see here they're actually I was very impressed at how sort of deep they found it to be helpful. So, they became aware of the part of the personality they didn't know about. They were really reflecting on who they were and what they wanted. They got to understand what anxiety is, how to get rid of the feelings, and really that feeling of being able to identify and challenge negative thoughts and feelings. We also asked them, of course, what they didn't like about the sessions, and certainly some students were uncomfortable talking about personal stories. So Prevention does involve, because they're in sort of a group environment, that sharing of personal experiences can be really helpful, but definitely can be uncomfortable for some young people. Some thought it didn't have enough time. Some were annoyed that it took up lesson time. And honestly, the most common feedback I saw, I don't know why it's not on this slide, is that students said they needed more food because they were given like snacks sometimes. They're always like, we ran out of food in the first 10 minutes. So that was very cute. If it does sound like something that you might be interested in, we are running Prevention Facilitator training. And in the past, we've had roles such as youth workers deliver this in their services, drug and alcohol workers, of course, teachers and school counsellors within the school, but certainly a lot of external staff coming in and running the program in the school themselves. So we do have a 2-day training workshop coming up at the end of November. It will be online, and basically we go through more of the theory behind personality as a risk factor for substance use, and then we go through how motivational interviewing and CBT can help challenge those cognitive distortions and help the young person. And then we go through basic counselling skills, going over cognitive behavioural therapy and motivational interviewing. And then we spend a lot of time doing role plays and practical exercises so that, when you go to implement Prevention, you're fully equipped with how to actually do that. So if you are interested, my email is just down at the bottom, and we'd love to have you there. There's a few places left. So just to sum up, Preventure is a personality targeted program. So we deliver it to students with high risk personality traits. It can be delivered by psychologists or teachers, but also youth workers and drug and alcohol workers, as I mentioned. Overall, in randomized controlled trials, we see about a 30 to 50% reduction in alcohol use, including binge drinking. And we also show benefits in reducing emotional and behavioural problems like symptoms of depression, anxiety, and conduct problems. I would like to acknowledge there's a huge team behind Preventure, both in Australia and internationally. So these are some of the research team, and thank you to the funders. And if you do want more information, the Positive Choices website has a great page on Preventure, or also that second link down here the second 2 links are links to the Canadian and international research page, so you can find out more there. And I'm told that questions and comments are at the end of the session, so please hold them on till later. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you, Lucy. And we've just popped in the chat as well the link to the Positive Choices Prevention page as well, if you want to save that link to refer back to it. And now I'm going to hand over to Kylie, Jacob, and Alira, who are going to be discussing strong and deadly futures.
Thank you. Okay, is that working? I'm just going to assume it's working. Thank you. So I would like to acknowledge the Darug people, who are the traditional custodians of the land that I'm on, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I'd also like to extend that acknowledgement to the custodians of the land that you're on. So the program that we're going to talk to you about today is called Strong and Deadly Futures, and it's a school-based program designed to prevent alcohol and drug uptake amongst Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people. And we're currently in the process of trialling it with 24 schools and communities across Australia. So I work at the Matilda Centre, where I'm project managing the trial, and Jacob and Alira, who are here with us today, also are working on this project. They work at Barang Regional Alliance, where they're leading a consultation process with their local communities to provide input into the program. So you're going to hear about that in a little bit. But first, I just wanted to walk you through a bit of the background of Strong and Deadly Futures and how it came to be developed. So if you attended the last Matilda Centre webinar, you will have heard about the Climate Schools program, which is soon to be called Our Futures. Climate Schools is an alcohol and drug prevention program for school students, and there have been a lot of trials of that program over the last 15 years or so. So during the course of those trials, we've been asked by teachers and other stakeholders whether there were any similar programs that were more culturally appropriate for young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So in response to that, about 5 years ago, we started thinking about how we would develop a program like that. So at the Matilda Centre, we have a really strong focus on co-design. So all our school-based programs have been developed with school students and staff, and we've got a well-established model for combining evidence with input from the people that the program is meant to be for. So the first thing that we did was to establish an advisory group of experts in Aboriginal health and substance use prevention to oversee the development and inform the scope and methodology for the project. So just under half of the experts involved were Aboriginal, and they were involved in this project all the way through, providing oversight. We then conducted consultations with a range of stakeholders. Over half of those were Aboriginal, and we asked about the wellbeing priorities in their communities and the key messages that should be included in a program like this. So one thing that came out strongly there was that the program should be more holistic. So in addition to the alcohol and drug content, it should be empowering and strengths-based, and it should include elements of cultural identity. So to complement that, we also reviewed the international evidence to find out what effective prevention programs exist for Indigenous youth and the key elements of the programs that make them effective. So here we found that there was a really big gap for Australian teachers because there are only about 3 programs that we were able to identify for Australian schools, but the studies were about 20 years old and the programs weren't rigorously evaluated. We also did a review to identify factors that increased or reduced the risk of using alcohol and drugs amongst Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people, so we could try and target the factors that we might be able to change. So that's our broad structure for developing a program. We find the best available evidence on what programs should include. We combine it with feedback from stakeholders who have a role in the program's delivery, and we set up an advisory group to oversee the development. Then we co-develop the program with students, with the expert advisory group providing advice throughout. So the next thing we did was co-develop the program in partnership with Galimba, which are an Indigenous creative design agency, and staff and students at 4 schools. So across the 4 schools, there are about 80 students involved around the 12 to 13 age group, and over half of them were Aboriginal. The students participated in a range of activities to give us their perspective and stories about positive things in their communities. We also ran a national storytelling competition to elicit stories more broadly across the country. And then we used the stories to create a narrative that would cover the key prevention messages within the context of a story. So I'm going to show you a bit about what that process looked like.
In the first session, we got cameras so we could take photos of positive things.
We had to go take some photos and then we came back and they were sharing.
So this is for my role model. It's really important to have inspiring females. And just trying to extract their stories really, so work out what it's like here in this community, what they do for fun, and what are some of the challenges that they might face.
To be able to work closely with communities across Australia and engage with youth to find out their perspectives and the way they want to represent their voices in these resources is really quite important.
So once the team had collected all the information, feedback from all the kids around the country, we brought it back to Galimba here into the studio and started developing our characters and really trying to create the individual characteristics for each personality.
There really is nothing better than actually sitting with a group of young people, getting them to look at the work that we've been doing that they've helped create, but then to show it back to them and get them to inform the final product in terms of exactly what language we should use, exactly what illustrations. It's just such a wonderful process.
When I heard about the project, I thought it was a great opportunity for kids to have a voice in something that's supposed to be about their age group, their life and their needs.
Depth, but it goes into the right amount of depth.
That name needs to change.
Maybe like
well, I guess
I see the girls again or something like that.
Yeah.
And that sense of ownership on a project, I'm really excited to see the looks on their face when they can identify parts of their stories in the platform.
Sort of gives you something to strive towards.
It's about making this information accessible and engaging so that our youth can make informed, strong and deadly decisions about their future.
So that's how the program was developed. And once the script for the story that's the central component of the program was finalised, we recorded voices for the characters, and the main characters actually are voiced by some of the students who were involved. So after the program was developed, the next thing we did was pilot test it in those 4 schools. So over a period of 6 weeks, teachers delivered the programs and we measured the outcomes we were hoping for before and after the program ran. So we found that the students showed improvements in drug and alcohol knowledge, reductions in psychological distress, and the feedback was really positive too. Students enjoyed the cartoons and stories, and teachers liked that it was easy to implement and engaging. So Strong and Deadly Futures has demonstrated that it has the potential to be an effective program for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people. But the pilot testing phase was too short to examine the main outcomes we're interested in, which is whether the program actually prevents alcohol and drug use, because they're longer term effects that we expect to see emerging over about 2 years. So to test the program more rigorously, the next thing we're doing is conducting a randomized control trial in schools across Australia. So we're still focused on it being a co-development, and the way that we're doing that is really by partnering with each local community where the trial will run. So Aboriginal community controlled health organisations in each location will conduct consultations with the local community to get feedback about the program. Then we'll collate all that feedback and adapt the program for different local areas. In addition to the local consultation, at the national level, we'll have oversight provided by an Aboriginal reference group. Then after the consultation and adaptation phase, we'll trial Strong and Deadly Futures in schools in 2022 and follow the students up over the next 2 years to see whether it prevents alcohol and drug uptake. So now I just want to show you a bit about the program itself so you can see what it looks like and how it works.
Strong and Deadly Futures is a social and emotional wellbeing program for secondary school students. It was co-developed with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and non-Indigenous students. This culturally inclusive school program aims to empower students, build on cultural strength, and prevent drug and alcohol use. Strong and Deadly Futures is delivered online. It includes 6 lessons to be taught in health and physical education classes. In each lesson, the key messages are delivered through an illustrated story.
Trisha, how do you deal with these guys? They're always trying to get us to drink and smoke.
You've got to find different ways to say no. I mean, what you guys said to Harry and Dazza before is pretty much what I do.
Like me saying that my throat hurts?
Yeah, exactly. Giving an excuse is one way, or if you're feeling confident, you can say no and explain why.
There are also activities teachers can implement with their class. This includes a range of group and individual activities for students to learn more about the content and how to implement these skills in practice. There are also teacher and student lesson summaries to further explain concepts. All content is aligned with the Australian curriculum and New South Wales syllabus for Years 7 and 8 Health and Physical Education.
Right, so where we're up to now is the consultation process. So we're really privileged to have Jacob and Alira from Barang Regional Alliance here to tell you about that today. So there are 4 schools on the Central Coast participating in the trial. So Jacob and Alira are running consultations with Aboriginal adults and young people in those communities to get feedback about the program. So they're going to tell you a bit about that. And what a time to try and be doing consultations where we had to pivot at the very last minute from doing everything in person to everything online. But I'm going to let them tell you about that. So Jacob or Alira?
I'll go first. Hey everyone, I'm Jacob Smeaton. I'm a proud Carrot man from southwest Victoria, but I've been born and nurtured on beautiful Darkin Young country. And yeah, I'll give you a bit of background on Barang. So Barang's virtually a unified voice for the Aboriginal community on the Central Coast. So we have 7 out of the 8 Aboriginal organisations on the coast opted in as partners, and we work in the backbone organisation within that, working to bring government to table with our Aboriginal organisations, and amplifying the voice of our fast-growing and large population on the Central Coast. So pretty much we jumped on the idea of doing consultations with community, especially on a program that's going to be implemented into four different schools that are significantly different in area within the Central Coast. We have a large region that goes with our large population. We often have disconnect between, the southern end, the north end, and we thought providing voice to alter this program and adapt it specifically for each group in the community. We thought that would be an awesome opportunity. And one of the big things that we value at Barang is the voice of our Aboriginal young people. So we particularly were interested on amplifying those young people's voices. So we decided to set up consultations for all the schools and communities. So there's four of them, and we decided to do adult and young people consultations. Obviously, probably valuing the young people consultations a bit more, not discrediting the adults, but it's going to be implemented for young people. So it's important that their voice is heard. So we decided to go with a Jamboard. It's an online sort of presentation that can be interacted with people who have the link. And obviously doing it over Zoom, it's very hard to sort of record people's voices without recording itself, and that can be hard with consent. So we thought we'd go with this, and it's worked well with our first consultation, and hopefully will work well with our second. But we basically just ask questions. It's sort of a two-way street as well. So we're getting info for the program, but also this info can be used for our organisation itself when providing summaries to government about what young people want and what the community wants. So we ask questions relating to health, well-being, drugs on the format that you can see, and go through the animations and stories from the Strong and Deadly Futures program, and we gain feedback and sort of just collate that and discuss with the community what they want out of these programs within schools, because often, historically, we all know there's been a disconnect in governmental systems and education specifically. So we want to focus on the inclusivity, and that's what sort of sold me on the program, that it doesn't focus on the exclusion of Aboriginal people and the inequity, but it's more just fundamentally valuing and including our voices for a program for all. So that's what really sold me on doing these consultations. And I'll let Alira introduce herself.
Hey everyone. Oh, sorry. Hey, my name is Alira Moore. I'm a proud Wadi woman. I come from the South Coast, but I grew up here in beautiful Darkin Young country. And yeah, we're delivering consultations at the moment, and it's going really good so far. But just to touch on what Jacob said, before. The information that we do get back obviously is going to help alter and adapt the program, but it's really positive because we can use it for the community here on the Central Coast. There was a very popular comment that came up in our first consultation with the adults about transport and needs for Indigenous kids, and I think it's really good that it's also making aware of these other issues. And yeah, we also asked them, you know, what does health and wellbeing mean to you? And yeah, kind of gave their personal opinions, and I thought it was really good and really exciting. And I love I love that it's inclusive and better for all kids. They can feel that their stories are in this program, and I feel like they'll learn more. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Oh, I was just going to add as well. Oh, sorry, Kylie.
No,
I was just going to
you go.
and it's important that we get like place-based, you know, information and voice as well, because communities are so different. Like New South Wales, we think we got out west, we got coastal, and you know, it's all different, and we all have different experiences, and it's about understanding that and then implementing that into the program while empowering the Aboriginal community on the Central Coast. Because this also, one of our big issues that we're trying to tackle is Indigenous data sovereignty as well. We have a Indigenous data network, and this provides us with, you know, our own data as well that we can use for our community organisations. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about them being place-based and including different community voices. And we've deliberately, with this program, when recruiting, tried to get very different communities involved so that we're not ending up with just one version of the program that doesn't ultimately apply to anyone. So just to tie it all together, if you're developing a program or a series of activities, make sure you know what the actual need is first. That would be my first advice to CDATs. I guess you probably know this already, but we don't want to make programs that are not useful or not usable. So we speak with stakeholders really early in the process to find out what they want before we start. And so because you're embedded in your local communities, I'm sure you're really aware of what your local community needs, but it's just something to keep in mind when you're trying to plan something that's for someone else. If you're talking to people about what they need, think about the possibilities of answering multiple people's needs with one research activity. So whether it's a consultation session or interview or survey. So by chance, as Jacob and Alira were saying, some of the information that came up in the consultations was helpful for Barang, but it hadn't actually occurred to me to intentionally do that when we started this. So that was a really good learning for me, and I would deliberately seek to include questions to benefit them if I was doing this again. If you're developing a program, co-develop it with the people who are going to use it. So our school-based programs are easy for teachers to implement because in every single trial we do, we get feedback from teachers about what they do or don't like and how we can make it better. The programs are always engaging for students because the students have contributed to the ideas, the stories, the activities. And this really leads into the next point, which is to leverage everyone's unique skills to make your activities and programs as robust as possible. So it was Jacob who came up with the idea of using the Jamboard to record consultation feedback online. And this fit our needs perfectly. It is simple enough that everyone can use it. It is an empowering method of recording information, and it is interactive and engaging. I had never heard of it before Jacob mentioned it. So that was a massive advantage. Alira too is bringing graphic facilitation skills to our reports. This is another thing I'd never heard of. They're like mind maps that record people's feedback in a visually engaging way, and it is perfect. It is perfect for conveying the information we're collecting, and it's just one of those things that, you know, you don't hear about until someone else mentions it, and then you realize that it's perfect for what your needs are. The participants in the actual sessions contribute their ideas, and all of the input makes the program relatable for the local community, and it makes it really more than the sum of its parts. So I cannot overemphasize enough what a strength it is to have this sort of diversity of input, and I've no doubt that that's a particular strength of CDATs. Another key point that I think is really important is to use evidence wherever you can. So it doesn't have to be sophisticated. You can search Google Scholar, you can limit the results to the last 5 or 10 years, include the word review in your search terms, and just see what comes up. So that's how I found these papers about community approaches to AOD prevention, including one that turned out to be written by the Matilda Centre. So that was nice. So you can use evidence for program development. We did that with our reviews of effective AOD prevention programs and the risk and protective factors to prevent against AOD use. So those inform the actual program content. You can also use evidence when you're thinking about implementation. So what factors are important when implementing programs to make sure that they work? So one thing we're thinking about with Strong and Deadly Futures is whether, rather than having a single program that you roll out everywhere, it might be a better approach to have core elements of a program that you expect to be effective, like the cartoon content, and then you mix it with flexible activities that community members choose and or provide input into. So it helps make the content more locally relatable, and it could potentially strengthen connections between implementing partners, like if it's a youth service and a school, for example. Finally, it's always important to assess your impact. So you can have straightforward pre-post surveys to see what participants think. You can have a full-blown monitoring and evaluation plan to track community level change over many years. You choose the level of evaluation that fits your needs and resources, but don't overlook it, because the story of the impact you're making is really powerful for everyone involved, as well as anyone who might want to fund you. So if you don't know where to start, just ask a researcher for advice. And sometimes research can look complicated, but it really doesn't have to be. All you're really trying to do is think about, what am I trying to do? How am I going to do it? How will I know if it works? So that's really all we have for you today. But if you have any questions, you're free to ask, or also to get in touch with us.
Thank you so much, Kylie. And I think there's just some really nice reminders you just ended with there about how research doesn't have to be complicated. I think working in a research centre at a university, we often can make it complicated, but it doesn't have to be. You can just do, like you said, pre-post survey, and that is research. Now I'm just gonna hand over to myself. And lastly, today I'm going to be talking about the Inroads program. So Inroads is an early intervention to address co-occurring anxiety and alcohol use problems amongst young people. And we know the focus of this series has been on prevention, and we've talked a lot about school-based prevention as well, but we thought it's also good to touch on early intervention, as it does often go hand in hand with prevention. And Inroads is a program that is available now, and you may be working with people who are already using alcohol and other drugs and have those concerns. So this is a program that you may be able to recommend to the people you know. And I just firstly want to start by acknowledging the Inroads team here that you can see on the screen, as what I'll be presenting today is largely the work of this group, not myself, and in particular, Associate Professor Lexine. Here's just a bit of a quick outline what I'll be covering in terms of the Inroads program. So today's session is focusing on prevention for specific population groups. And I think it's important to acknowledge that many people with substance use concerns also have mental health disorders or mental health concerns. And anxiety and alcohol use disorders are two of the most commonly co-occurring disorders. So it's estimated that 1 in 3 people who have an alcohol use disorder also have an anxiety disorder. So that's really, really high statistics. And although the order and the onset of these disorders varies from person to person, we know that these disorders can often fuel each other in a feed-forward cycle. And what we mean by that is that anxiety and alcohol use both exacerbate each other and can make each other worse. And in this cycle that you can kind of see on the screen here, you can see that the tendency to self-medicate with alcohol can then lead to an increased reliance on alcohol to cope. That can lead to more drinking and increased risk of dependence on alcohol, and then a range of other potential alcohol-related problems and harms. And this cycle continues to happen unless treatment is sought. And if left untreated, these conditions can fuel each other and can lead to more severe symptoms and greater impairment. So we know that someone with an alcohol use disorder, as well as an anxiety disorder, is going to have worse symptoms than just the anxiety or the alcohol use disorder alone. So a really important question to ask then is whether it would be better to treat these problems together, especially because people often see these problems as interrelated. And the answer is yes, we definitely should be treating them together. And previous research from the Matilda Centre has found that integrated anxiety and alcohol treatments amongst adults have found to be significantly greater than just an alcohol treatment alone. So in some work by the Matilda Centre, we found that combined treatments improved anxiety symptoms. They had equivalent reductions in alcohol consumption compared to just people who received alcohol treatment. And then they had greater improvements in their overall functioning and quality of life compared to those who only received treatments that were focused on alcohol. So again, it's about really integrating and finding the underlying factors that are driving the alcohol use, which at times can often be someone's anxiety. And research shows that the average time people wait to seek treatment for an alcohol use disorder is 18 years. And every time I hear this stat, it completely surprises me. So people are often well into adulthood when they are seeking treatment, when they really have these entrenched disorders. But there is an opportunity here to intervene early to enhance coping strategies and interrupt this trajectory before the anxiety and alcohol use become entrenched. So why should we intervene early? We know that the transition to adulthood is a key risk period, and we know it's a time of increased exposure to alcohol, and there is a peak in harms related to alcohol at this time as well. So we're talking about that age when people are finishing high school, starting uni, starting new jobs, and some of the risks or other behaviours that often emerge at this time could be alcohol-related violence and alcohol-related accidents or car accidents. And this transition in early adulthood, like I said, can have some big personal and social changes, such as new living arrangements, new jobs, and new relationships and friendships. And navigating these can be exciting but challenging, and it can be more difficult for young people experiencing anxiety in particular. And with the wide availability of alcohol, people can often develop this alcohol coping style, such as drinking to cope or drinking motivated anxiety relief. And it can become even more pronounced across adulthood. So now we get to Inroads. So this led to the development of an online early intervention to enhance anxiety coping skills and address that coping motivated drinking. And this program is called Inroads. So Inroads is a 5-module online program designed to be completed over 5 weeks. And here on the screen, you can see a screenshot of the program dashboard. And the program was developed in consultation with young people and has a youth-focused design, as well as different case examples throughout the modules, which have come from real young people that helped with the development of the program. And then on this slide, it just shows the primary focus for each of the 5 modules. And each module will introduce new skills as the program progresses, and previous skills are reinforced in subsequent modules. So there is anxiety and alcohol check-ins and goal settings that you complete in each module. And modules take approximately 30 to 45 minutes to complete. And they include a number of interactive features such as videos, quizzes, and games. And there's a lot of open text fields where participants in the program have to think about their anxiety and alcohol behaviours, and then they can write about those thoughts and feelings within the modules. And the modules are designed on the basis of 2 types of therapy, which Lucy actually mentioned in the prevention program as well. So cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT, and motivational interviewing. And I won't go through all the modules, but I'll just give you a moment if you want to read sort of the content of each on the screen there. Now, I want to quickly touch on a trial of the Inroads program, which was run from 2017 to 2019. And this trial aimed to see if the Inroads program was effective. And I just want to note here too that the Inroads program was originally designed to be the 5 online modules, which I just showed before, as well as some brief psychological support via a therapist, via phone calls or online chat. So in this trial, participants completed the module each week. They also received an email with some tailored feedback. And then at the end of modules 1 and 4, they also received a phone call, or if they preferred, just a text chat with a therapist. Now, in terms of the trial, this trial recruited young people aged 17 to 24 in Australia who reported harmful alcohol intake and anxiety symptoms. And then they were either randomized to receive the Inroads program and that brief psychologist support, or an active control where they just received an alcohol information booklet. This trial as well was really trying to see if that combined alcohol and anxiety treatment and approach was more beneficial to just the standard alcohol support alone. And just like Strong and Deadly Futures, this is a randomized controlled trial design, or an RCT. Just on the screen here, this figure shows how they flowed through the trial. So firstly, people did an online screening to check if the program was right for them. And if they were deemed eligible, we then collected some baseline data to see where they were at before starting the program. And then they were either randomized to the Inroads program group or the control group. And then we collected some follow-up information at 8 weeks and then again at 6 months. And then at the start of this year, we actually also completed a 2.5-year follow-up. So we followed these people up for 2.5 years. Now, here are just some of the demographic statistics about the people who participated in the trial. So there were 123 participants, and among them was a mix of genders, education levels, employment statuses, and location amongst the participants. Now, I'm just going to briefly touch on the results. So we haven't analysed the 2.5-year follow-up results yet, but we have done for the 6-month. So for up to 6 months after receiving the Inroads program, young people reported decreased hazardous alcohol use, reduced binge drinking, reduced general anxiety symptoms, and reduced social anxiety symptoms. And the control alcohol information group did also see some reductions in alcohol use at 8 weeks, but then these changes weren't sustained at the 6-month follow-up. This highlights that the control group relapsed. However, the Inroads group was able to sustain the changes that they had made, and by 6 months, by the 6-month follow-up, the Inroads group had reduced their drinking by 62 standard drinks per month and prevented 4 binge drinking episodes per month on average. So we can really see here that these people who were in the Inroads group and the other group did have really high levels of alcohol use prior to being in the program, but the Inroads group was able to reduce that. And if you are interested in reading more about the trial and the results, I've just hyperlinked the full paper on the screen here. And when you get the slides, you can click on that and the paper is free to read. And here's just some of the participant feedback for those who received the Inroads program. So one person had some specific content that they really found the phone sessions beneficial. And then other comments around that they found the program, the Inroads online program itself really useful, and some really moving comments about, it was able to turn their lives around in the 6 months. So now I'm just going to touch on where this program is at now. So there was this program, it was developed, it was trialled and found to be effective. So where does this leave it? Well, they wanted to do a rollout of the program Australia-wide, so it could be accessed by as many people as possible. However, the therapist support component that was included in the trial was not a cost-effective or sustainable way if it was going to be scaled up. So this then led to the adaptation of the Inroads program into a fully self-guided version. So in place of that brief telephone support that participants were receiving, instead they get therapist support emails which are tailored to each individual through response and to the responses and the goals that they're writing in the modules. And this is all done sort of through response-based algorithms. So everyone's getting a really tailored message at the end of each module. And while this is all happening, COVID was going on, so we've also integrated some extra content around how to cope with stress and anxiety during uncertain times. And then this then leads us to where we are now, which is the national rollout of the program and free access as part of an open trial. So in April this year, we launched the open trial. And what this means is that everyone who meets the eligibility criteria is able to access the program for free as part of a trial that's being conducted by researchers at the Matilda Centre. So before in the RCT, people got split into either receiving the program or that control group. However, this time there's just, if you're deemed eligible, you're able to just get the program. And we're doing it as a trial still because we want to be collecting some information to see if this self-guided version is still having the same benefits as before. And the eligibility criteria is just on the screen here. So you can see the eligibility criteria has been expanded to people aged 17 to 30. It's for people who live in Australia and for people experiencing anxiety and reporting hazardous levels of alcohol use. So again, when someone registers for the program, there's like a pre-screening questionnaire that they'll do just to check that the program is suitable for their specific needs. And there are some ineligibility criteria. So if someone is reporting high suicide risk or things such as their primary concern in their life is related to other trauma not related to alcohol and anxiety, the program's sort of not offering that more intense support that they may be needing. So instead they're offered some information, other resources that may be more beneficial, and they're not deemed appropriate for the Inroads program. So I think it's important to remember this is meant to be an early intervention. It's not meant to be a treatment program as such, or a program that's really that high level of support that some people may be needing. So as CDATs, feel free to let people know about the Inroads program and direct them to the Inroads website, where if they think that they could be suitable, they can do that pre-screening questionnaire. If they are deemed eligible, they then get free access to the 5-module program to complete over the 5 weeks. And if you'd like to find out more about the program, you can visit the Inroads website at inroads.org.au. And we also have a Facebook and Twitter account with our handles there on the screen if you'd like to follow us and stay up to date with any news that we share on there. And if you have any questions about the program, feel free to email the info@inroads.org.au email address, or you can just get in contact with me directly with my email on the screen there as well. And now I think it's time for our question and answers. So I'll let everyone else hop back online.
Thanks so much, Tara. Definitely a lot of praise for all of the programs that have been presented today, and I think of great value also to all of the CDATs. I think it would now be a sense of, can they take all? Which one do we choose? Which one's more relevant? How do we do it? So some comments that we've had within there is Paula, that's online with us today, I know is with Newcastle Uni, and particularly around the Preventure, she's identified that it would be an amazing program for uni students. Oops, sorry, you just changed your screen, so I lost my bit there. But having a look at whether it would be great. Sorry, just bear with me while I scroll back. Amazing for uni students, first year in particular, and love that it focuses on personality style. And I think that that's a really great thing as well. We all know that personalities make a difference to the way that we see the world. There is a question in regards to Preventure. Is there a cost?
Yes, there is. Thanks everyone for your comments and questions. So Preventure, it's $12 per student. So each student needs to have one of the student manuals. That's what they work through. It contains the intervention and they each need to have their own. So $12 per student. Then the training fee is also $750 per person to get trained up. And yeah, if you're interested, as I said, feel free to send me an email and I can answer any other questions.
That's awesome, Lucy. Thank you. Quite cost effective in the sense of per person, and even for facilitation, as we do often see that the cost for learning is quite high and quite expensive and can't always be met. So $750 is achievable, and $12 is also something that's achievable depending on the size of the school. Some schools have got small populations, so that would be a great thing, but others but that's something that we would also discuss with the CDATs, is if there is a cohort out there that would like to look at their CDAT promoting and supporting, and particularly around that facilitation side of it, so that we're putting that capacity back into the individual communities. We'd love to have those conversations with those CDATs. Again, thank you, Paula. I love it that you're always so deeply engaged with us, and I love your comments in there. Compliments is love the process used to develop the strong and deadly futures. Here on that one. You've got thumbs up from me as well. I love co-design. Very empowering and very engaging, so that's really great. And I have to agree that jam boards have been introduced to us this year, and we got very excited as well about that interactivity and adaptability online. I'd love to learn more, particularly from Alira, and Tara already knows that I've had a very steep learning curve in this technology space, but particularly around the graphic side of it. We know that a lot of people do really readily engage when they can see things as opposed to reading a lot of data as well. So I think that that's a real compliment to all of you. Lots and lots of thanks there. So that's really fantastic. And Paula's also very excited about the fact that we can share these links with everybody and anybody. If you know that there are other organisations out there, other networks out there that you feel would benefit from knowing about the programs that we've been promoting through the Matilda, well, promoting the Matilda Centre and their programs through the CDAT platforms, we would love more people to know about that in that space as well. Not many questions in the sense of from our participants, so please encourage those that are online with us if you do have any questions. Oh, one's popped up now. Thank you, Slavikia. I hope I've pronounced that right. Is there a way for manuals for prevention to be borrowed if we already have trained facilitators?
Hi, Savika. Thanks for your comment. I think I remember, yes, you have already done the training, so it's awesome to get in touch again. So I'm assuming you mean the student manuals, and no, we really do need each student to have their own because they're very, the student will write in their own, they'll often rip out pages to stick on the wall, things like that. So it's kind of difficult for them to be shared. That being said, if you're having issues with funding, you can always get in touch with us. We often will help find funding from different community organisations or things like that. So we're certainly happy to help out with that.
Excellent. Thanks, Lucy. And again, it's something that we could negotiate with the CDATs as well, as if there was a cohort that were looking to have the manuals and there wasn't funding available in other spaces. We could certainly have that conversation with them and really work to support them as well. Paula has a question in regards to Inroads. Is there a cost for that program?
No, so just in terms of full thing for the uni students as well, we do know that there are a lot of uni students who register and participate in the program. So I think Inroads is definitely aimed at that uni student age group as well. So Paul was probably happy to hear that we've finally got something for the uni students, as I know you work with them. And yes, Inroads is completely free. So as part of that open trial that we're currently running, we're really actively looking for people to be involved actually with the program if they are suitable. So definitely share it far and wide. And yeah, it's completely free. They've just got to complete the modules and then do our follow-up surveys.
That's fantastic. And like we say, wherever we can get access to resources, and particularly around what we see in that growing space of anxiety and depression in young people, anything we can do to provide them with support, knowledge and awareness of self is certainly a benefit, not only to them, but to society all round as well. So it's absolutely fantastic. And I love that you're so excited, Paula. Thank you so much for being so interactive with us. A comment that I'd like to make is, Jacob, when you said about that place-based and the importance of it, can you give us an example of where perhaps you've not done place-based and the differences that you've seen in the actual outcomes and the engagement within the communities?
Well, I think just many programs that are designed for Aboriginal people, within the community and stuff, can often, as they have historically, have that paternalistic sort of nature to them. They don't understand the true needs and true desires of Aboriginal people, and I think that that obviously has detrimental effects, and we've seen through Barang and our Aboriginal organisations, when we've been connected and had voices for community, say with the recent Indigenous voice and the legislative voice, we actually fought to get a consultation for our community, and at the time we ended up running the largest community consultation for the voice, which showed the interest and allowed us to voice our community's importance to have the voice legislated and Central Coast considered.
Mm-hmm. And from having those voices included, what sort of strengths did you see grow within those people that were a part of that co-design?
Well, I think the network of community, it just builds strengths and connections within networks as well. That social capital is one of the most important things I've found in community. Being able to know people and draw on other people and have connections is super important, especially on the Aboriginal space, because there's so many, we don't want to duplicate services, and communication is so key. So just provide networks, knowing who does this, who does that, and just having a shared definition on what community is, I think, yeah.
Yeah. And did you see that it actually reduced duplication and strengthened what was in the community? Was there a lot of adding value to all of those networks and collaborations that you saw?
Yeah. Well, I think at the moment we're working with our collaborations with DCJ and stuff, and that is often a a system that has been detrimental for Aboriginal people, but it's important that we're working to allow that to have Indigenous input, and we're seeing like places like Yarranellan or Duncan taking on like cases and stuff and it's having great effects for the community and our families, you know. Because on the Central Coast, it's probably not widely known, but we have one of the biggest Aboriginal communities in like New South Wales, but in Australia, and it's quite a transient and diverse community. People coming in, people coming out, a lot of different mobs all together, and it's important that we just understand the different voices and work to different strengths, I think.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more there, Jacob. Music to my ears in how we like to operate and support the CDATs. Kylie, something you mentioned that I think is really important as well, and it's something that is a part of the way that I operate, but you mentioned about being intentional and the importance of that. Where have you seen that without that level of intention, the differences between having one and not having one?
You know, I added that one at the last minute because, and it was specifically because this had happened. So we planned Strong and Deadly Futures so long ago now. You know, we go through the process of getting funding for the trial, and you have to have everything already planned out, and you don't know how it's going to turn out. Originally, we didn't know if we were going to partner with Aboriginal community controlled health organisations or schools. In some places it is with the school. And so it was only in attending that first consultation, and then Jacob and Alira sort of saying later, oh, that's fun. Like, because we were saying, oh, we talked about this thing for ages, that wasn't program specific really. And they said, oh, that's fine. It helps us work out our you know, our activities. And I just kind of thought, why would we even, why would we even try to do this without seeing benefits on both sides? And sometimes it is hard to plan in advance because you don't know what environment you're going to end up in, but you can think about it all the way through. And so we did think about it. I did think about it at that point, and then later said, okay, we should try and intentionally do this going forwards. But I think particularly, and well, the other thing was that I was trying to think of how would this be relevant to CDATs? And I kind of think if you're in that situation where you are different organizations working together, that it must happen all the time for you. And I guess maybe you also think about it naturally without having to be prompted quite the way that I did. But sometimes you achieve things that are great by accident. And so just trying to increase the opportunities so that it's more by design than by accident. Like if we can increase the likelihood of achieving good results for multiple people or multiple organizations, then that has a multiplicative effect for the community, you know, rather than summative. And so I don't even remember what the question was, but I hope I answered it.
You certainly have, Kylie, thank you. And it's about that thought, and it's something that the CDATs do face on a regular basis of what is it that they actually want to achieve within their communities? What are their intentions? And we don't know what's going to be the result at the end of it. But it's about having that intention and about wanting to provide opportunities for communities to have improvements, to see improvements, to change the way that people see things. And at the end of it, it is about that well-being of community. And I love what Paula is saying in there, and Jacob, your response to it. Paula was saying social capital is paramount. And then your comment, Jacob, of connection to people is important culturally. And it's important right across all communities, regardless of which culture we come from, is that if we don't have that connection with people, people feel isolated. That's where the issues of isolation, sadness, depression, anxiety, come from, and that's what we're actually seeing such a great deal of. And over these last, I was only saying to someone the other day, did 2020 actually happen? It's a bit of a blur, and now at the end of 2021, these last 2 years of COVID have certainly tested everyone in their strengths of resilience, of personal capacities, and how it is that we all function as a community. So it's really great to see that we as a program have the opportunity to promote even broader the opportunities that the Matilda Centre offer to everybody out in the communities, and particularly around those young people, because as we have often said and will continue to say, the young people are the leaders of the future, and if we can facilitate them to be of sound mind, of well mind, and of a balanced spirit, then we're in a good place to be able to be looked after in old age, which is not that far away from me. So down the track, I'd like to know that we've got a robust community out there who's going to take care of each other and ourselves. All of the programs that have been presented over the series, we are so very fortunate to have had all of the staff from the Matilda, various different faces every time we come online, of sharing all of the opportunities that are there. So I would just again love to say thank you to Tara and Emma, who jumped on board with us at the very beginning. I think, Kylie, you were in those initial ones as well. Such a blur now. But for all of the staff for so graciously giving your time, for sharing these opportunities with our CDATs, and for being so willing for them to be in touch with you as well. We are really excited that hopefully into the future we're going to be holding hands a lot tighter over a couple of projects that are coming up. So I'm really excited about that from the CDAT program. We'll be sharing that with our CDAT members, so stay tuned. We're not going to let it all out of the bag just yet, but over time we will be sharing more and more information. Again, I'd just like to say thanks to everyone who has jumped on board with us over the 4 series, over the sessions. Promote the YouTube channel, share that information. The more that we can do to promote the work of the wonderful people at the Matilda Centre, the greater we're all going to be in the long run. So I'll turn my mic off now, Tara, and I'll let you close us out for the afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Karen, for the lovely words at the end there as well. It's definitely been so fun, I think, at the Matilda Centre. We often talk about all these community groups and we do interact with them, but yeah, it's great to deliver this series to the CDATs directly. And yeah, as Gail said, please feel free to share like the series of videos that we've put together, and I'll circulate around an email with the summary of all the presentations, as well as sort of links to all the programs that we've covered. So Preventure, Strong Healthy Futures, Inroads, and then the ones we discussed last week as well. So Climate Schools, the Illicit Project, and Health for Life. We'll put them all in the one email, so you've got all the links in that one space. And thank you again, just everyone, for joining us. And as always, feel free to reach out via email if you have questions, comments. We're always happy to hear from you. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you.